Good evening. Welcome to the City of Bothell City Council meeting for February 11th. If you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Roll call. We are all present except for Councilmember Rayum, who is going to join us in about 5 minutes from my understanding. Everybody have a chance to look over the meeting agenda for tonight? Any suggestions or alterations to the time frames that are currently scheduled? Deputy Mayor?
Great, thank you, Mayor. We do have, at my request, that proclamation I'd like to have at the beginning of the meeting.
Great, and I have that noted here as well. Anybody else? Perfect. Any council committee reports?
Mayor?
Yes.
The most significant thing from the RFA committee would be the item that we have in our agenda packet tonight.
Okay. So report on that at that time. Before I jump to council committee reports, we will have a visitor section this evening. I know that we didn't have that listed on the agenda, but we will have an opportunity. I do have a sign-up sheet, and we'll allow others from the public to comment as well. So seeing no other council committee reports, I do have the honor of a proclamation this evening. Before I make that proclamation, which would be the Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, I'd like to invite Bean Rodine to the podium here to introduce herself, and then I'll have the opportunity to read this.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Bean Rodine, and I grew up in actually the Bothell area along with my mom, who is here with me. And my dad and mom actually lived here and built a home over 50 years ago in the Bothell area. And my dad, back in 1999, had colon cancer and passed away from it. Never had been sick or anything, and also had never had a colonoscopy. And so years ago, I had reached out to Dell and asked for his help to raise awareness with colon cancer and the need to have colonoscopies and the preventative side of it. And anyway, so that is my mission now. And this past December, I myself had a routine colonoscopy, and I was diagnosed with colon cancer. So now it's even that much more personal to myself and to my family and to Chamali as well. So it does affect many lives, and so I just urge any of you that know anyone that is age 50 to at least have a routine screening colonoscopy and empower those people to have it, because I just turned 50 in October and had my routine colonoscopy, and that is why we have it done, is to find it earlier so that we don't end up where my dad did. So thank you very much for letting me have a few minutes to speak, and go empower people, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll read this into the record, and I'll hand it to you.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to steal the microphone from you. I really appreciate you sharing your story. It is definitely a powerful one, and thanks for being open in front of folks that you don't know. So, Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas colorectal cancer is the third most commonly diagnosed cancer and the second most common cause of cancer deaths for men and women in the United States, and whereas colorectal cancer affects men and women equally, and whereas the vast majority of colon cancer deaths can be prevented through proper screening and early detection, and whereas only 39% of colorectal cancer patients had their cancers detected at an early stage, and whereas the survival rate of individuals who have early-stage colorectal cancer is 90%, but only 10% when diagnosed, after it has spread to other organs. And whereas if the majority of people in the United States age 50 or older were screened regularly for colorectal cancer, the death rate for this disease could plummet by up to 70%. And whereas colorectal cancer is preventable, treatable, and beatable in most cases, and whereas observing a colorectal cancer awareness month during the month of March would provide a special opportunity to offer education on the importance of early detection and screening. Now, therefore, I, Joshua Freed, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby declare March 2014 as Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So I'd like to present this to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well, my heart certainly goes out to you, and I know council members up here may want to share their own thoughts on this month, but my prayers for your strength and for you and your family as you're going to battle yet again.
Thank you.
All the best. I don't know if a council member wants to jump in.
Wish you the best.
Thank you.
Certainly a heavy subject for us all, I know. Thank you again. Moving to the next section would be our visitors section. I do have a sign-up sheet this evening. Sandy Gwynn is here to join us this evening. Sandy, nice to see you.
Good evening. Sandy Gwynn, Bothell resident. Is this on? Sandy Gwynn, Bothell resident. My heart goes out to you. I'm a cancer survivor, and I would just really encourage people to have mammograms, colon screening. I've had that done. Unfortunately, I was one of the ones that didn't think it could happen to her. I'm 63, and I had to endure 2 rounds of treatment, surgery, and radiation, and it would be much easier if I just would have gone in for a mammogram. It's real simple, so I would encourage the listening public to do that. I'm here tonight on Agenda Bill 14-22. I submitted a letter, so I won't go into the details on that. I have been attending the Regional Fire Authority committee meetings. It is an advisory committee, and it gets rather technical, so I'm sure the city attorney can jump in at any time and correct me if I'm incorrect. Where I'm not sure with the Regional Fire Authority Planning Committee, if it's required to publish notices similar to the City Council, as it is advisory committee, but it is made up of other fire districts that do have fire commissioners, a quorum of them. And I explained last week how I kind of went on this rabbit trail. So I'm basically here to answer any questions, but also I listed some items that I would also like further questions on, because when I read the operating procedures, they talk about, for the RFA committee, they talk about the regular meeting. Well, a regular meeting, if there's a quorum of a fire district, needs to be noticed as a special meeting. And so that's where it's not clear to me with the language that was used in the operating procedures, if there is a requirement similar to what city councils have as far as noticing. So I'm really would rather have it cleared up sooner than later in the process. And then I know there's going to be public records request. I thought I could submit a public records request to Woodinville Fire District because they were doing the tapings. I have a voicemail where I need to now submit to each district and City of Bothell for an individual public records request. But where do I submit for Snow 10? It kind of goes on like that with the subcommittees and the standing committees, I'd like to be able to at least attend and observe and hear what's going on, and how are those going to be noticed? Does Bothell have a standard where they post an agenda? And then also special meetings requirements of how it's to be in that special meeting. You need to spell out exactly what is going to be done, actions going to be taken. You can't go outside of those.
Okay.
At least that's my understanding, and do correct me at any time. Thank you.
Great. Nice to see you. Thanks so much. I don't have any further sign-ups for the visitor section, but if anybody here would like to comment on items that are not on the agenda and open for public hearing tonight, is welcome to come to the podium and speak for 3 minutes. All right, I see no hands going up. So that would close our visitors section. Moving on to the consent agenda. There are no items pulled this evening. The consent agenda is AB 1419, AB 1420, and 1422. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and seconded by Councilmember Agnew. If everybody could place their vote. And if the clerk could display. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Rayum absent and excused. Moving on to the next item, the new business section would be Agenda Bill 1422 to consider approval of a professional services agreement with the Emergency Services Consulting International to provide consulting services to study the feasibility of creating a regional fire authority. We have our Fire Chief Bob Van Horn this evening. Good to see you, Chief.
Good to see you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The professional services agreement before you is with Emergency Services Consulting International, ESCI, and it's for the purpose of providing consultant services to the Regional Fire Authority feasibility study. The contract price is $62,047, and it's being shared equally between the city, North Shore Fire, Snohomish County Fire District 10, and Woodinville Fire and Rescue, for an agency share of $15,511.75. The city's 3 partnering agencies have approved the agreement's contract period, scope of work, contract price, and payment schedule. The feasibility study ends December 31st, 2014, and this provides a 10-month study period. The scope of work in Exhibit A includes data collection, stakeholder interviews, pre- and post-consolidation fiscal analysis, consolidation options, and opportunities for public involvement. So with this, staff recommends that you authorize the city manager to execute the professional services agreement with Emergency Services Consulting International in substantially the same form as presented. This ends my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. We have a question? Councilmember Lamb?
Thank you, Chief. I had a couple of questions. First of all, does this committee, does the Regional Fire Authority Planning Committee have any authority to bind the city of Bothell to commit to a regional fire authority?
No. Once the feasibility study is done, then the planning committee can say yes or no, it makes sense, but then each agency also has that opportunity. So the planning committee says, let's move it to our jurisdictions, but one or more of the jurisdictions could say, no, this just doesn't make sense for us, so there's no binding.
So for purposes of this agreement, is any action taken by this planning committee similar to the agreement that we're considering tonight, where each individual agency in our packet, there's an approval letter from all of them that they have to come back before they spend money or take action, and it has to be approved by our city council here?
They've already authorized the funds, and so with these letters, they're saying that they're going to pay the city when invoiced. I'm not sure if I follow your question completely.
So my question is just, there's been some discussion and some conversation about the idea that the Regional Fire Authority planning process, in and of itself, without weigh-in from our city council, could take an action that would bind Bothell. And I guess what my question was is, tonight we have in front of us an agreement that we as a city council are voting yes or no on. And that's an agreement to spend a relatively, each agency is responsible for up to $15,511.75. Before that committee can spend any money, they needed to come to us to get that permission and for us to expend those funds. That was my question. So I guess I'm saying, is that sort of par for the course? Is that how this committee operates, that before it expends money or takes an action that binds Bothell, it needs to have the approval of this council?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief.
Great, thank you. Any other council members? Questions?
I just had some comments after we had the motion.
Okay, Councilmember Spivey? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
First, I just wanted to say that the RFA Planning Committee created an ad hoc committee to review the different proposals submitted for this consultant service, and they winnowed that down to 3 that came back to the full RFA Planning Committee, and that Planning Committee made a recommendation and for final vote, and then moving forward with ESCI to each of the committee members, parent members for ratification, and we're to the point of the city of Bothell will administer and be part of, as described here in the agenda bill.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anyone else? Further questions for staff? Yes, Councilmember. Go for it. Yeah, Sandberg.
So in July of 2013, the council, I thought, authorized spending some funds for consultant services, and then I asked today if any of those had been spent, and the response is nothing has been spent to date on consultant studies. So any work that we've done to date has all been in-house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then I was trying to, when I was looking at the scope of work, figure out what the deliverable was on what this consultant work would be. And I imagine at the end, as a council, we would need to have a clear understanding of what the financial plans were, and service delivery plan, transition plan, and the governance model. And when I read that scope of work, it didn't seem to me that it was going to actually provide that as a deliverable. It was just going to facilitate discussions around that. So for this money, are we going to be getting those elements, and are those elements that are required under state law for regional fire authority planning?
I don't know if they're required under state law. What we will get out of this feasibility study is a comparison of what the 4 agencies look like now and what they might look like under a regional fire authority, and then a plan to, and that will involve the fiscal analysis, operational analysis, and with that, there will be a decision that the planning committee and each agency will have to make as to whether they move forward. How that plan is developed in the future is an unknown right now. That's why we're bringing a consultant on board. There's just many more questions than what we have answers for. And the meeting on March 6th in North Shore will be a good meeting to come and listen to the consultant and we can ask those kind of questions to find out what are the next steps. If we were to say that we are in a step-by-step process, we're probably in step 1 or 2. And I don't know what step 15 and 16 look like right now. So I know we want to have all the answers before we start, but this is a leap of faith by all 4 agencies. So.
Okay, thanks. And then I had a question for our city attorney.
Okay.
Ms. Gwynn provided this testimony tonight, and just trying to look it over really quickly, it looks as though there was action taken at a January 9th meeting, special meeting, to negotiate the contract with ESCI, or to direct staff to negotiate a contract. So there was action taken at this special meeting, and she testified a couple weeks ago about the concern that maybe that special meeting had not been noticed properly. And then it looks like in here that the meeting was noticed maybe in a couple of locations, but for the wrong date, for February 7th. And so my question is, if RCW says, and this is her attachment D, says no governing body of a public agency shall adopt any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, etc., except in a meeting open to the public. Is the action taken to negotiate a contract with the SCI on January 9th consistent with state law?
Well, to go back, you have to go back and a little bit further than that, because the only action that the RFA can take is as an advisory opinion to the constituent bodies. So there's a parallel track going on with this contract. This contract was actually the RFP was put out by the city, and completely within the city's guidelines. We use a city contract, city employee. Chief Van Horn reviewed the various proposals, chose one to recommend, and it's coming back to our council to review and approve. So the action that we're looking at tonight is completely consistent with state law and city requirements for the city to adopt that contract. So what happened with regard to the RFA meetings is a separate issue. The city is not the RFA planning committee. The city has followed its own process for approving this contract. We are completely in line with state law and with our own policies and requirements. As I understand it, I'm not counsel for the RFA planning committee, so I can only speculate, but as I understand it, the RFA has a set of rules that they operate by, and one of those is to follow the Open Public Meeting Act. And the Open Public Meeting Act has requirements for noticing special meetings. I cannot tell you whether that special meeting was noticed appropriately or not. They do not have a website to post things on, so they don't have any requirement to post it on a website. They don't have a normal place of business that they can post it at. So many of the requirements in the statute, they simply don't qualify or don't have to meet. But I'm not going to try to offer you an analysis of what they did or whether they did it properly, because it has no bearing on the action that we're taking tonight, and I'm not counsel for the RFA and cannot speak for them.
So then to follow up, we post meeting information on the city website for the RFA Planning Committee meetings. So I believe Ms. Gwynn asked, well, who's of the four agencies that are participating in the RFA planning process, which agency is taking the lead on or centralizing the data collection and the meeting notice actions? I mean, who's doing that? If the city of Bothell is taking the initiative to post meeting minutes, should the RFA Planning Committee then designate the city of Bothell or one of the four member agencies to be the contact point for like what she said, public records requests and the central clearinghouse of information for meeting notices? I mean, who's doing that?
I don't think that I'm the person to answer that question, but that is probably a question for the RFA Planning Committee. They have adopted rules. They have the ability to adopt processes. They can choose to designate, but one of the things you need to remember, this is a planning committee. It's not an agency, and the OPMA is designed to apply to agencies. Now, they've voluntarily chosen to hold open public meetings in their rules, and so they've chosen to be subject to that, and they do need to be, in my opinion, aware of the requirements of the OPMA. But again, they're not an agency. There's a question in my mind whether they even would come under the OPMA, normally speaking. So,
well, I guess that's a good question, because in this attachment D for RCW 4230.020 in definition section, it says a public agency means, and then C, any sub-agency of a public agency which is created pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act. So I would have assumed that the four bodies that form the RFA Planning Committee did so through some kind of legislative act, and therefore the RFA Planning Committee is a public agency. But I guess that should be clarified for the public, whether or not the RFA meets the definition of a public agency and is therefore required to, to follow all the Open Public Meetings Act requirements under state law. Because I don't know. I don't know if the RFA Planning Committee is a public agency or not. But I think that needs to be determined, and it needs to be demonstrated, and that one of the four participating agencies needs to be the central clearinghouse of information for the public.
Okay. Sounds like you've asked some questions that potentially you can get some future answers back on. Sound fair? May not get all the answers this evening. Any further comments or questions? Anybody else? Councilmember Evans?
Mayor, I'd like to try to clarify a few things. This is a planning committee made up of 3 representatives from the North Shore Fire District. What's their number? I don't know. Fire District 16. There's 3 members there from them. There's 3 members from District 10. There's 3 members, and when I say members, these are elected officials from these organizations. There's 3 from Woodinville and 3 from the city of Bothell. When we got together, when we started back in the fall of this last year, we were a planning committee looking at the potential of an RF of what would be the potential of those 4 agencies combining together to provide fire services for this area, for the district of all of these agencies. We are strictly a planning committee. We do not bind any of those agencies to the decision of going forward with an RFA. That committee will make a recommendation to all the agencies of what the committee would recommend, but each agency will have to take, at least my understanding, and certainly I know from the city council standpoint, we will have to take an action, the council will have to take an action whether or not to proceed with forming an RFA. And at that point, it will go to an election by the public. At that, and that decision will be made on all of this study that we're doing, and this study that we're starting with right now. We've hired a consultant to work through these myriad of issues and questions about what's involved in an RFA, who brings what to the table, how will it function, what will it cost, all of those types of things. We have none of those answers to date. That's why we have a consultant that's going to help us compile that information. Once that information is compiled, then, or as it's being compiled, the committee will review that, and at some point towards the end of this contract runs to the end of December, I think hopefully before that, we'll be at a point where we'll have that draft, that document, and each agency then will be able to make their recommendation back to their jurisdiction as to whether or not how to proceed or not proceed. So very quickly, that's kind of how this is functioning. One of the very first items when this group of 12 people got together, one of the very first items that was discussed was public involvement. We wanted this to be, the public to be very well aware of this. We had met with other representatives who have gone through this process, and that was one of the most important things. They said, you need to keep the public involved in this so they're aware of it and will know how to respond to it and whether or not they even want to approve something like this, if in fact it goes to a vote. So I think Ms. Gwynn has brought up some good questions. I guess I just want to assure the council that sounds like we do have procedures that we're going by. Maybe we don't have everything answered as it should be, but we will work to do that. I think these are good questions. I serve as the vice chair on that committee. The chairman is from the Woodinville Fire District. And so we can certainly work towards getting these answers, but we we'll make sure we can go back at our next committee meeting. I don't think our next committee meeting is till March 6th, I believe, is the next one. And we certainly can bring these up at that meeting and get a process in place on our public involvement. I think Woodinville Fire and Rescue has been the person at the meetings taking the minutes and things, and so that's the person who's preparing the minutes. They come back to our committee and we approve those minutes. Maybe in reference to this particular contract, the city of Bothell is the agency that's taking responsibility for the contract. All of the other organizations have looked at it and agree with the scope of work, but the city has been the one that's been tasked with administering that contract. So that's why this is before us tonight. So I just, all of the actions we agreed that the website, the city, Bothell would serve as the main website continue to be aware of this process. North Shore Fire District and Woodinville Fire District have links on their website that brings you exactly to the Bothell website for review. District 10 doesn't have a website, so they're posting where people can get more information from this. But it's it's a very open process. No decisions have been made one way or another. We're very early in the process. We're starting to gather information, or the consultant will, and we'll be reviewing that. And I just want the public to know that this is a very open process, and we certainly want their involvement. Our meetings are generally, I think we agreed in our initial development process that our meetings would be on the first and third Thursdays of the month. Is that correct? We have, there was the one case where there was a meeting scheduled for January 2nd, which was the day after New Year's, so we moved that meeting back to the 9th, where we discussed this process, and there was a subcommittee. There was a representative. I was a representative from Bothell. There was a representative from each of the other agencies who sat down and reviewed these consultant proposals and looked at them, and we took a recommendation back to the committee as to who they should interview. They interviewed 3, and then the committee as a whole agreed on that the ECI would be the one that we would recommend that the contract be with. So if there's things we need to clarify as we go along here, we certainly can do that. But the attempt is to keep this very open and the public involved as much as we can. We run our meetings. We have public comment right at the beginning of our meetings. The public has a chance to talk. Ms. Gwynn has been very good at attending those meetings and usually has good comments for us. And so they're run like any other public meeting, and if we need to work better on our noticing and minutes and those types of things, we can certainly do that. But it is very much an above-the-board process that we're going through. So just with that background, if there's no other discussion, I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Motion by Councilmember Evans and a second by Councilmember Lamb. The recommended action is to authorize the city manager to execute the professional service agreement with the Emergency Services Consulting International in substantially the same form as presented, and not to exceed the amount of $62,047, of which the city's share is $15,511.75. I'd like to recognize the Deputy Mayor Spivey first.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting the motion. And just a little point of clarification, the staff that have been helping the RFA have been very good, and I believe the difference in the January 7 versus January 9 was nothing more than a scrivener's error. Those do happen sometimes, and if you notice in, I believe, our next agenda item, the Planning Commission found one there also. But the process has been very open, and it will continue to be open, and I support this action because it will give us the information for the Planning Committee to fabricate the financial model, the governance model, and the operations model without this information that the consultant will be providing us. We can't do that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anybody else? conversation on the motion on the floor? Councilmember Sandberg.
I'll be supporting the motion, but I think it would be, I think it's important for the planning committee to really nail down what the procedures are for public noticing and who is going to be the agency that's going to be the central contact point for information going forward. I think that's really important.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rayam, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it matters, but I did get here at 6:10. I don't know if we want to put that in the record, but
She's got it.
she's got it. Okay,
Yep.
good. So I do as well support this contract. I think it's a really important step to look into this, look into a regional fire authority and see if it's right for Bothell. There was a couple things I just kind of wanted to mention while I've got three of the committee members right here. Is that in Task 1B there's a background information where there's going to be a stakeholder input process. And I'd be interested in being part of that process, or at least kind of understanding what the process is. I don't have to be one of the interviewed, but I am keen to how stakeholder processes roll out from local governments. And then the other piece was the presentation that's going to be made to the RFA. I'd really like to attend that meeting. I know I'm not one of the committee members, but I can be there as the public. So just give me a heads up. I don't check the RFA website all the time, so. Was it?
I'm going to break protocol and just ask, does a notice need to be sent if he does attend?
If any council members who are interested in attending any of the RFA meetings, if you could provide us notice, and that we could evaluate that and determine if, in fact, we need to, notice it as a special Bothell City Council meeting.
Perfect.
Regardless of whatever notice the RFA committee may be publishing.
Perfect. Great, thanks.
So yeah, I plan to be there, but I mean, I can't say for sure today. I don't know what the date is. So,
else? Further comments? Deliberation? All right, seeing none, the motion on the floor is to authorize the city manager to execute the professional services agreement with ESCI in substantially the same form as presented and not to exceed the amount of $62,047, of which the city share is $15,511.75. If everybody could place their vote. And if the clerk can display. And I'm happy to say it passes unanimously with all council members present this evening. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate the presentation this evening, and thank you, Council, for the conversation. Our next item on the agenda this evening is a special, or it's actually just a study session. It's Agenda Bill Item 1423, study session to consider a Planning Commission recommendation regarding proposed downtown sign code amendments. And Dave Boyd, nice to see you this evening, Dave. You have a
Thank you,
presentation
Mayor,
for us?
council members. I do have a brief presentation here tonight on this issue. So tonight I'm bringing to you a series of downtown sign regulations amendments. This is, and actually, could we dim the lights on this screen here? This is, we've combined Planning Commission recommendations on two downtown sign related issues that they heard separately that were initiated by council separately, but we thought it made sense to combine them and package them as one for council review. The first one that the Planning Commission dealt with had to do with A-frame signs in the downtown sub-area, and the other one that was initiated in 2013. That was initiated in 2012. The other one initiated in 2013 were a number of other downtown sign regulation amendments. And just as a preface, the downtown plan, the sign regulations didn't get a lot of attention during the adoption of the downtown plan, and in any case, they are a complete rewrite from the previous regulations. So I think it's fairly normal for us to be making some early course corrections here. And in both cases, they had to do with issues that came up with regard to implementing the new regs. On the A-frame signs, Planning Commission considered three general approaches. Well, first of all, the reason that this fairly immediately after the adoption of the downtown plan, our code compliance officer recognized an issue with implementing this new sign code. The sign code, the downtown plan called for A-frame signs only to be allowed for eating establishments with table seating, restaurants and cafes. That's fairly radical change from what existed before, and since we never required permits for A-frame signs, it was somewhat problematic to determine which were legal conforming signs, which were not. We basically decided that the proper approach would be to create a program under which we announce to the businesses, do an education component about the new regulations, announce to them that we would begin enforcing that in say a year's time to allow them to utilize signs that they'd invested in, and then enforce the code at that point. Then, as we were preparing this for Planning Commission, we got an opinion from the city attorneys that limiting those types of signs to one particular type of business was not constitutional, did not pass muster per recent case law. So we needed to make a change there because of those two issues. So Planning Commission considered three general approaches. One would be to just basically delete the provisions in the downtown plan for A-frame signs or portable signs as they're classified in the downtown plan, and apply the citywide regulations downtown. The second option would be to, kind of the other end of the spectrum, would be to ban A-frame signs in the downtown entirely, or perhaps in just certain districts. And analysis showed that some downtown businesses, even food service uses that are allowed to have A-frame signs, seem to be managing okay without A-frames. And then we also clarified that this would not affect what are called temporary non-commercial signs, such as the Little League sign in the distance of the photo in the lower right, but temporary commercial signs are not allowed in any case, and particularly not in landscaped areas as this one. So so there are still some nuances with even a blanket ban. The third approach, which Planning Commission eventually adopted in their recommendations, was to adopt some stricter restrictions on the time, manner, and place of A-frame signs in downtown, and those are the things that city attorney said that we could regulate in terms of A-frame signs, but allow them for all businesses. This required a little more detailed analysis of what type of restrictions to apply, whether to allow each business a single A-frame sign, regardless of the number of street frontages they have, and also we wanted to look at establishing standards for the amount of unobstructed sidewalk. The Planning Commission's deliberations on A-frame signs were informed by the downtown wayfinding consultant's report on downtown, where he pointed out that one of the things we could do to improve the general downtown environment for business would be to clean up the proliferation of A-frame signs, and made a number of other recommendations, including possibly having some sort of a design board to work with merchants to make sure that a certain level of quality was achieved. We also dealt with the issues of enforcement, like I said, a program by which we would come under full compliance over time, over a year after adoption, and that we would include that with an outreach and education program with the businesses. So then moving on to other downtown sign regulations, there were a number of signs that had come to us for review, where we were struggling a little bit with the new regulations, where we thought amendments were required or necessary or desired anyway, and then some others where we, in taking a closer look, just determined that some modifications were in order. One of the issues had to do with non-conforming signs and just reducing the number of legal non-conforming signs that were being created. So grand wall signs was one that came to us. The Masonic Lodge wanted to put a large sign on the back side of their building. They're allowed on essentially blank walls without windows. And in this case, we allowed them to count these contiguous wall areas, even though they're not all in the same plane. That was an interpretation. We thought it was a reasonable interpretation and one that it made sense to make explicit in the code. We also, when we got to looking at the areas required, currently the downtown plan requires an unfenestrated or windowless portion of wall of at least 1,000 square feet, or actually greater than 1,000 square feet. But looking at some of the conditions downtown, we thought that really didn't fit the current situation or the likely, with development, the size of blank walls that we're likely to see. So Planning Commission is recommending reducing that threshold to 1,000 square feet and reducing the maximum size for ground wall signs to 800 square feet, or a quarter of the blank wall area, whichever is less, to be more consistent with the scale of downtown Bothell. So these are just some other examples of a wall area where, with the new regulations, a grand wall sign could be placed, and a new development that currently has a blank wall, with redevelopment, that could get covered over. But in the meantime, they've painted a mural. This is not actually a sign. It wasn't determined to be a sign, since it isn't advertising a business in that building. But the smaller sign in the upper left corner would be considered a grand wall sign. But that mural is about 800 to 1,000 square feet, so that's close to the limit that would be allowed for a grand wall sign, although it's clearly greater than a quarter of that wall area, so you'd need a much larger blank wall to do an 800 square foot sign. This is the graphic from the downtown plan, again showing that the scale of walls in this graphic is bigger than what we typically see in downtown currently. And we also looked at the Anderson building. McMenamins was, we were working with them on some options for their signage and trying to determine whether that was a viable option. In the end, they determined that they didn't really want to use that option, but those wall areas would now qualify for grand wall signs. A second sign that we thought some amendments were necessary were wall signs. The current downtown plan says that wall signs should be placed below the second floor level. On this building, the second floor level is about here, but they've clearly designed the building to have a fascia panel appropriate for signage that extends above that second floor level. So we changed that to say that those signs can be placed up to the second floor sill level, so they can use that entire wall area. And then buildings that are on the top floor or single-story buildings can have wall signs that go up to the parapet level. So here, this is how the graphic would be changed in the downtown plan to show that this area is available for ground floor uses, and these wall areas are available for upper floor uses. And so this is a situation here, an existing building that currently has installed a non-conforming sign, but this amendment would allow that sign, at least in terms of the location. We haven't checked to see if it meets the size requirements. Similarly, projecting signs. One other thing on wall signs, similar to projecting signs, is that currently the code only allows wall signs for businesses with dedicated ground floor entrances, and we have many buildings in downtown where there are businesses inside that don't have a dedicated ground floor entrance, and that we thought should be afforded some means of signage. So we said that wall signs would be appropriate, projecting signs would be appropriate as well, and this is another example of a upper floor use that has used a projecting sign, and the proposal is to allow them on the floor that they occupy. Similarly, there was we're going to get into building identification signs, but the recommendation includes allowing building identification wall signs applicant to substitute those for projecting signs, as shown in this example. This development, this is the 104 development. They chose not to do this particular treatment because they didn't want to wait for the code amendment. Similar to those projecting signs and wall signs, we are allowing, the recommendation is to allow blade signs, under awning or under canopy, and recessed entry signs for interior or upper floor tenants. And this picture is an example of Main Street Mall where several interior tenants use under canopy signs for their businesses. Roof signs was one that, as we were reviewing these and reviewing some historic images, discovered that many of the original facades included what would be classified as roof signs. The Erickson sign here and some sort of accent signages in this historic photo. The Kimball sign extends above the roof line. So we thought it was, since the code does encourage businesses to restore the original facades, that it would be appropriate to allow these. Hillcrest Bakery is one, probably not an original building facade sign, but they recently replaced this and actually had to scale it down to meet the current requirements and as a facade sign. So many of these small adjustments in the requirements are to address these issues that have come up and provide a little more flexibility within the code. Another issue that came up primarily because of McMenamins was to allow freestanding signs for downtown anchor developments in the downtown core that reuse existing buildings that are set back from the street frontage. So here are some examples of streets freestanding sign, legal non-conforming monument or streets freestanding signs that would continue to be allowed as legal non-conforming signs that are grandfathered. And then on this page shows the McMenamins proposal where they're proposing 2 freestanding signs along their frontage because they felt that because of the trees that they were preserving and other reasons, using building-mounted signs, which makes sense when you're building up to the street line, as the code for new development, as the code requires. In their case, to get the visibility that they thought was necessary, they felt they needed these freestanding signs. The code already had an exception for freestanding signs on the backs of these kinds of lots where there was surface parking, so they were allowed to do freestanding signs in these locations. So it was a fairly minor modification in the code to expand that exception to the front facade as well. And then canopy and awning signs. Taking a closer look, we realized that we have a number of canopy and awning signs that are currently or are legal non-conforming, but they don't conform with the current downtown code. The Bothell Furniture sign here, the letters are a little bit too tall per the code. The code says that this type of sign should have the lettering all in one row. And again, Planning Commission felt that that was a little bit too strict, and that there could be a little more flexibility. So we moved that into the guidelines so that these kinds of signs would be allowed in the downtown plan. And then canopy and awning signs, we had a proposal, again, for the 104 that exceeded the size limits in the downtown plan. And the recommendation by Planning Commission was to relax those somewhat, not enough to make this proposal legal, but to make a reasonable accommodation for slightly larger canopy signs. And then building identification signs, again, the 104, the code allowed building and these are the only signs that the code allows for residential buildings, buildings that don't have businesses. It allows canopy signs to be placed over the main entrance on a facade, and wall signs above. And the proposed code amendment was to allow, and previously it allowed only one per establishment, and they made the case that in these larger developments with multiple street facades, it was appropriate to have a building identification sign on each street-facing facade. So that was the recommendation, and we also allowed canopy signs to be expanded to include above canopy signs, and building wall signs to be to give folks the option of doing a projecting sign for a building wall sign. And then again, looking at the 104 as an example, temporary wall signs, they brought up some issues with their leasing plan and the length of time that some of these larger developments need to do their initial leasing, and that the 60-day limit was not adequate for that purpose. And we had a fair amount of discussion on this, did some research, and determined that it was appropriate to extend it for that situation, and came up with a formula that set the base duration at 60 days for consistency with other parts of the code, but added an extra day for each unit a multifamily project has. So in this case, they got 175 days, almost 6 months, which was pretty consistent with what they felt they needed for their initial lease-up. So again, just to remind folks of the area we're talking about, this is the downtown sub-area, and this would apply throughout the sub-area with the exception of the strip along Bothell Way, north of Wayne Curve on the west side that retained the general commercial zoning and therefore is controlled by the citywide code. So the next steps, we have received a request from Main Street Properties to add one other change that wasn't considered by the Planning Commission. It's a fairly minor revision to take a look at the requirements for directional signs. The downtown plan defers to the citywide code, which exempts directional signs up to 2 square feet, and that's what they've installed on the 104. But they feel that that's inadequate size, especially for downtown where we're developing some wider streets and larger buildings. So because of that, and we think that's a reasonable change to consider, but since that wasn't included in the Planning Commission process, we think that it would require a council public hearing. So we could come back to council with an ordinance and council findings for consideration at that time, along with any additional analysis council would like to see. With that, I'd open up for questions, and also I'd like to apologize for not sending the responses to Councilmember Sandberg's questions directly, and that you got it, probably most of you got it on the dais tonight, but and didn't have a lot of time to digest that. But
Well, I think you got the questions today at noon, so
I did, but
we have answers here.
could have gotten them to you a few hours earlier.
Well, nobody said you complained. Well, do you want to jump in, Councilmember Sandberg, with first questions? And maybe while you're asking questions, we could have the opportunity to, as a council, to look at what you asked.
I think you answered all of my questions, so I thank you for that. And the one question at the end was, is there language that prohibits placement that damages landscaping in our rights of way? And just based on the examples that you've shown in the pictures today in your presentation, I guess I wouldn't agree that the main issue is with temporary real estate or campaign signs. I think it's kind of across the board with portable signs. And so I'm wondering, do you think it's possible to conveniently draft language, if the council would agree, for a public hearing, and we could include that along with increasing the size of directional signs?
I think that would be appropriate. The existing language for portable signs says they shall be placed on the sidewalk in front of the business, so that would tend to preclude them from going into landscape areas, but there's some language we added that talked about placing them on street frontage, so making that explicit that they are not allowed in the landscape areas would be a good addition, I think.
And then I don't have any other questions. And I just have some comments when people are done with their questions.
Perfect. Thanks. Councilmember Lamb.
Dave, I had a question on, this has to do more with the enforcement side, and I don't know if this would go to Joe, because as I understand it, do we not enforce our sign code on the weekends, or generally speaking?
We generally enforce the sign code on a complaint basis. So since there's no one around to take complaints on the weekends, unless there's a safety issue that would be handled by the police, I think that's accurate. We generally would not be out there enforcing sign violations on the weekends.
And so as I understand kind of the narrative of this, there were some constitutional issues that needed to be addressed with the downtown area, and a lot of the comments that came back from the public were, particularly from members of the downtown business community, were like, why would we be treated differently than the whole citywide? It should be treated, if it's good for downtown, it should be good for, the entire city. Is it your position that some of the provisions of the code are actually sort of better for those who are using signs in the downtown than they would be if we were to apply it citywide, or no?
Well, I think the discussion at Planning Commission was that, one, that it's appropriate to have some different regulations for downtown. The whole downtown code applies different regulations downtown, and signage in particular, we are trying to create a certain look and feel, a higher quality pedestrian-oriented shopping environment, so the Planning Commission recommendation reflects that. And the other, there was some feeling that why don't we just apply this citywide, but that went beyond what was initiated by council. The initiation was just to look at the downtown sub-area A-frame signs there. So that's certainly open for consideration in the future, whether we want to apply similar restrictions citywide. But
City Attorney, but so your position is that these are essentially, from a business owner's perspective or from a sign user's perspective, the regulations in the downtown are more restrictive than what we would have currently under our citywide code.
They are.
Okay.
Not not significantly more restrictive as they were as they are currently. The recommendation is closer to the citywide code, but the differences are that it only allows one per business as opposed to one per business per street front. And one reason for that was that a business in a full block development could make the argument that they should get a sign on every frontage of that street block, and then we could wind up with quite a proliferation of signs. That's the main difference in terms of the number of signs.
And do you have any opinion, or was there any opinion at Planning Commission? Was it simply that it was beyond the scope of what they were tasked with, or as to the wisdom of applying these citywide?
Well, we felt that it was beyond the scope of what they were tasked with, so it wasn't really considered. I think there would have been some support for applying it citywide.
All right. And Joe, you had asked, or you had said previously that or I think whether you had said it or it had been attributed to you, that there was a challenge with having the limitation on saying A-frame signs were only for eateries or something like that. Do you see any benefit, just from a sort of liability standpoint, of having a consistent code throughout the city as opposed to just in the downtown area?
Not from a liability standpoint, no. I think we have the ability to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and it's a zoning restriction. Basically, you can have certain signs in certain zones. Is more of it's not content based, and that's where you really get into trouble, is when you're looking at content. Nothing's safe, totally 100% safe when you're dealing with speech and signs, but I look at that more as a time, place, and manner restriction.
What about from an enforcement perspective?
Well, enforcement is difficult for us on any of our code type issues. We have the need for, we could, with more forces, do more code enforcement, and that's always going to be the truth, but it's especially true at this point in time in our city.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Can I make one point on enforcement? So our code enforcement officer does struggle with this particular enforcing the A-frame signs, and so what the recommendation, it's not in the code, but the recommendation is to also establish a program that would basically set a date by which we would bring all of the signs into compliance, and in that case we would actually be going out and doing some proactive enforcement, and as of that date, bringing everything into compliance, and so that from that point forward, we could enforce on a regular basis.
So to that end, I mean, it seems like there would be some utility, particularly given the state of downtown right now, where directions are, changing and kind of finding people's located, that kicking that out until the essential sort of framework of the downtown is completed might make some sense to give some relief to business owners.
That's certainly something that we could consider, the time frame for that.
Okay, thanks.
And also, I failed to recognize that Planning Commission Chair Peter Baciuelo has joined us too. So if you have any questions of him.
Okay. Nice to see you. Anyone else? Further questions? We've heard from two. Councilmember Rayum.
So we received the Roger Brooks Destination Development Study in 2007, and we just have a short amount of the reporting here, but it says that there's over 40 suggestions to make our city more appealing and attractive to residents as well as visitors. And I'm just curious, do we have any idea of how many of those suggestions have been implemented since 2007?
I don't have that. I could get back to you with an analysis of that.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that the city of Snohomish does not allow A-frame signs in their historical district. Do we have any intel on that with talking with Snohomish? Was that a big deal to implement?
It was, from what I gather. I talked to the one of the planners there, and they're having similar struggles with enforcement of that code. But it's something that they've implemented fairly recently after a fairly long discussion and phased that in. I haven't actually. So it's been several months since I've talked to them about how that's going on.
So with the Planning Commission recommendations, would we have some relief on the quantity of A-frame signs that are currently on the streets in not just Main Street, but I'm interested about the citywide aspect of this as well, but would we have the same amount of A-frame signs that we have now?
No.
How much?
I think you'd see a significant reduction in the number of signs. There are a number of businesses that have 2 or more A-frame signs
Okay.
in downtown. I haven't looked citywide, but so much.
And just from, I drove up and down Main Street and looked at the signs, and it just seems, it is just clutter. Like you don't really read one sign from the other. You just see a whole bunch of A-frame signs, and it's just really not appealing. And I think it's definitely probably not effective at getting people to stop their car. I think this report is really important to highlight something that's critical to a city, and that's that we need not only people that live here to want to go down to our Main Street, but we need people to stop here that are driving through. And if it's not appealing, and I mean, this is a pretty scathing report about how unappealing our city is, I would hope that we do everything in our power possible to try to address these issues and make it more attractive. I've been on the beating that drum since I've been on council that I wish the city looked a lot more like it did, back in the 90s, where it was, you had beautiful flower pots and you didn't have a proliferation of A-frame signs, and it was clean, and the flower beds were weeded and the lines were painted, and it looked like it was cared for. And now it's just not the situation. So I just hope that we take this opportunity to try to make our city more beautiful. So, and I'd like to hear from business owners as well about how important those A-frame signs are to them, because in my opinion, it would make me not want to stop. If I drove to a town and it looked like that, I'd just keep going. So, and that's expressed in this report as well. So that's all I have.
Okay. Councilmember Evans.
How are our A-frames regulated in the remainder of the city?
The size is the same. We don't have as many design guidelines for how they should be built or how they should look. The quality of them in the rest of the city, the regulations for the rest of the city, and then the main difference in terms of number is that each business is allowed 1 per street frontage of the property they're on. So a sign in a mall area that has 3 street frontages could put 3 A-frame signs out along the 3 frontages.
So in the other areas of the city, is it just 1 sign, 1 A-frame per business then?
No, it's 1 per street frontage of the property that the business is on. So
in the case in the downtown, the little mall area there, where there's businesses inside there, they still have that right to have an A-frame out
right
in front.
And so many of those that are existing there could well be legal non-conforming signs that they had since before the downtown plan was adopted.
Okay, and I read something on someone made a comment about a 2-foot square sign code would limit signs to 1 by 1. Is that correct?
I believe some comment was made, but the 2-foot square requirement has to do with the directional signs. Directional signs are exempt as long as they're less than 2 square feet. That's actually about 16.5 inches by 16.5 inches.
And in the destination study, Roger Brooks, he recommended elimination or significantly reduction of the A-frame signs. That was, I guess he'd held meetings quite a bit with the downtown people, and at that point in time, based on what I read in here, that was okay for them. But then as this got a little closer into implementing, that wasn't okay, I guess.
Well, Roger Brooks didn't hold a series of meetings. He brought a team in. They did a kind of reconnaissance. They sort of secret shoppers came in and took a bunch of pictures, found their ways, looked at how easy it was to find your way around town, to find parking, that sort of thing. They put together this report, and then they did a presentation on the report. And Mr. Brooks is very charismatic, and he presented it in a way that a lot of the downtown businesses that were in attendance, and many of the ones that he put on the spot with some of his analysis, indicated that they agreed and would clean up their act. Some of them did. So it had some good effect. But when we held our hearings on the A-frame signs, we heard from businesses that they were important for identifying their businesses and bringing in business. So, which is somewhat contrary to what Mr. Brooks.
Well, and it looks like there was good attendance at the Planning Commission hearings, certainly from the business sector downtown, and that was good to get their input as this thing is moving forward. And in relation to that, what's the potential of this design review committee of the peers? Is that something that could be reasonable? I mean, we still have to have a sign code that we have to implement per the city, but there is a merchants association down there, is my understanding.
Yeah, and our reply to that suggestion was that we would welcome the merchants doing some self-policing and holding each other to a higher standard, but that didn't negate the need for some basic requirements from the city. I don't think we don't have the capacities from a staff standpoint to staff such a program, but the merchants would certainly be encouraged to do that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, do you have any interest in contributing? Questions?
Sure. At some point, there was a thought brought up of a uniform sign design, and I believe they mentioned kind of the bridge concept, like as part of that. Was that a big consideration for the Planning Commission? That way there was uniformity in appearance and size for our portable signs? Again,
I would say that that didn't get a lot of traction. I think that was another item that was thought to be something that if the merchants wanted to establish something like that, that there'd be support for that, but felt that would be going too far in terms of a requirement from the city's standpoint.
Okay, and it was mentioned the self-policing, and there is like the downtown merchants, but could there be the creation, if you will, in the downtown area similar to an HOA, where they have their own regulating body to do that stuff that has some teeth to it that the city could follow up on?
There could be. Other communities have done that, have developed downtown improvement districts that basically have taken over maintenance of certain street areas and this kind of function as well.
I'm not going so far as the maintenance of streets and all, but I was just thinking to the point of the signs.
Yeah.
They come up with their working with the city to come up with a design plan, and they have a downtown version of their portable signs that they say that this is what we're going to abide by, and they self-regulate everything else. Could that form of or level of self-governance actually be set up legally?
I think so.
I was going to say it could, yes. It's just a formalized method of policing themselves in terms of the types of signs that they'd like to permit, and they'd all have to fall within the umbrella of the city's regulations, but it could be done. I think the most effective downtown merchant associations that I've seen formed are really formed around collecting fees and then providing those fees for another agency, whether it be a city or a private contractor, to perform certain street maintenance, cleanup. I haven't seen one formed yet around the ability to police sign issues in a downtown.
I'm just thinking signs would be maybe one part of what they choose to tackle with their HOA, if you will.
True. Again, I think the key would be, is the merchant association or this collection of businesses willing to do that? And are they willing to sign on to that level of responsibility amongst themselves?
True. I do like a lot of what's come back, and I would support some of the other recommendations as far as public hearing and looking at the directional signs, things like that. I'm also supportive of when we get into the redo of Main Street, and maybe this is something we could put in as part, but to create, when streets are under construction, the flexibility, allowing for maybe some different style of portable signs or whatever, just so that those businesses are visible during construction. Because sometimes you do end up with a spoils pile in the way of something or a piece of equipment, and to have that flexibility to move a sign around where it wouldn't be normal, but because of the construction project, it could be allowed on a major project. I would be interested in that, even if it was on a case-by-case basis, or if there's a standard we could set up. But I would be interested in that, especially when we do get to our Main Street, to be able to allow that. That's all I have for now.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Everybody's had a chance to speak. This whole discussion reminds me of an old song, Signs Everywhere There's Signs. Everybody knows that song? I'll let you sing the rest. So everybody's had an opportunity to go through. We need to come to a decision tonight regarding if we feel comfortable with what's been presented so far. We want finding an ordinance to come back for a future meeting. If we want to have a public hearing as a council, or hold an additional study session. So those are our choices. So I think what we'll do, we'll start down here. Councilmember Sandberg's waving her hand. And so if you would like to comment on which of those you would like to move forward on, that would be great.
I'm sorry. I thought our first round was just to ask questions. So if I could just
I didn't know we're having multiple rounds this evening.
Could I just weigh in briefly on my thoughts about this, and then that will seg into...
Well, let me take a poll of the council to see if they want to open it up for another round of questions.
It wasn't a round of questions. It was just a comment.
Comments and questions. I mean, that's fair, right? Everybody had the chance to speak. Do we want to open it up for another round of questions? Sure, why not? We have one yes. Yes.
Okay, point of inquiry. So, as I understand it, Councilmember Sandberg, what you're saying is that you're going to speak to one of those three options, but you wanted to give your reasons for why you're doing it. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's
okay.
That's what I thought.
Let's do that.
Okay. So I think we have enough direction to bring this back as a public hearing.
Okay.
And I heard that there was some support about bringing back additional language for increasing the size of directional signs. And I was hoping there would also be support about providing clarifying language for prohibiting signs in landscaped right-of-ways, or having some language to deal with that. And I just wanted to comment that when I was but a wee lassie on the Planning Commission 16 years ago, the first thing we did was sign code amendments, one of the first things we did. And it was an eye-opening experience. There was a lot of discussion on that, and in the end, I felt like there was a lot of unnecessary argument. And I don't think anybody up here wants to restrict a business's ability to identify itself. It's hard enough to do business in this economic climate. And so I support the flexibility that the Planning Commission has recommended. I think that we need to support our businesses that way. That said, I think that the Destination Development's wayfinding study is a real eye-opener. I thought that was one of the best studies we ever had commissioned for the city. And so I think it's really important. That's why I asked the question about whether the businesses would be willing to self-police themselves, and we had a lot of conversation about that. I think having the flexibility in this sign code is really going to, its success is going to be determined on whether a downtown merchants association wants to self-police. I mean, we clearly don't want to. We want to put some basic requirements and then step out of the way so businesses can be successful. But the wayfinding study said in suggestion 11 and number 12 and number 39 were all about merchant-driven design review committees coming up with design standards and doing their own policing. And I think that's really important because although I agree with a business's ability to identify themselves, I also hear Councilmember Rayum's concerns about what it can look like, and we've had examples in that wayfinding study. So that said, I hope that the downtown merchants or the Greater Bothell Chamber will want to take that up and want to do that, because I think that's how the sign code and businesses in the city are going to be successful.
Okie dokie. Councilmember Rayum, do you have a feeling which way to go? Public hearing? Come back for study session?
I'd like a public hearing.
You'd like a public hearing? Okay. Councilmember?
Yeah, I'd like to see a public hearing. I'd also like the idea of the merchants policing themselves. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm welcome for this to come back as a public hearing so we could potentially pass an ordinance. And it is in the agenda packet tonight. Thankfully, everybody brought up the idea, but there is the suggestion on, actually suggesting 11 was if you allow for sandwich boards, consider a design review committee of peers. So there you go. Councilmember Lamb.
I support this coming back for a public hearing. I did want to say that I take exception to the idea that our city is unappealing, or that the way that our city looks right now is unappealing. I mean, one of the things I hear from residents all the time is how much they love our downtown and how much they love Main Street and the way that it looks. And I think that we have, freedom, and the freedom to advertise your business and the freedom to put up political signs is by definition messy. And not every business advertises necessarily in the way that we would like to see them advertise. I think that what the Planning Commission has done is listen and has provided a very flexible approach to this, and I think that's an important thing to look at. But as to hearing from business owners, in our packet we did hear from business owners. The business owners spoke very clearly, and they said, banning A-frame signs or limiting them is not, they called for self-enforcement, and they said that would have a really devastating impact on business. They spoke very directly to us in the materials that we had tonight. So I think that our city, both in the 1990s and in the 2000s and where we are today, there's always a problem with having to, mow the lawn, keep flowers up there, and we've always had, to all of my memory, we've had businesses who advertise and put out signs. I think this is a touchy area, as Councilmember Sandberg indicated on. It creates a lot of arguments. I think what we should do is to have a public hearing and have a practical back and forth with our community, listen to our business community, listen to the people who create jobs in our community, and work with our staff to try and get something that works.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Councilmember Evans.
Well, I support a public hearing. I understand that we would need one anyway if we were to consider this new request that has come to us. So I'm assuming that will be considered as part of the public hearing, and then what we have before us tonight, too. The one question I had was a little off point, maybe, but it's signs. What's the status of our wayfinding signs in the city? Was I not supposed to bring that up?
No, that's fine. The wayfinding signs were delivered, and then we realized that they were the wrong color blue. So actually, the vendor just picked them up, I believe, the end of last week to repaint them the proper color blue. So we will be installing those when they come back. So soon.
Okay, and those meet our sign codes too, or are they? How do they?
They're exempt as
that's convenient.
governmental signs.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Great, thank you. I'm very comfortable and welcome this coming back as a public hearing, and just making sure we're on the same page, Dave. The directional signs will be part of that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can also bring language on the landscaping issue.
Right.
Too.
And as I recall earlier, you said that would we should be able to take care of that by clarifying the language in there?
Yes.
Probably? Okay, good. Yeah, I support this coming back for a public hearing, and with the findings and recommendations and all at that point also.
Great. There you go, Dave. Look forward to having it scheduled in the future as a public hearing with the
Thank you very
potential
much.
to pass something on that evening. Perfect. Moving on to the next item on the agenda would be a study session regarding appointment of a salary commission. Jamie Marston, our Human Resource Director, will be joining us this evening for a short presentation and future direction by council.
Good evening. The Washington State Constitution prohibits the City Council members from establishing their own, or increasing or decreasing their own salaries while they're in a term of office. This is to prevent a legislative body from increasing their salaries and benefits without an intervening election. In 2009, the City Council established a salary commission pursuant to the RCWs, and this is an independent commission made up of three Bothell residents, and their purpose is to review and establish a compensation schedule for the elected body. This salary commission is appointed by the mayor with the approval of council members, and candidates provide a written request for consideration that is reviewed by council and mayor before appointment. The candidates cannot be officials or officers or employees of the city, and they cannot be immediate family members of officials or officers or employees of the city. The commission, once appointed, needs to convene and review and complete that review and make their filing of a salary schedule within 90 days of the appointment. So because of that, staff is recommending that the appointments be made by March 18th. This would allow time for their decision to be included in the 2015-2016 biennial budget. And so staff right now is just asking for direction in regard to the process for appointment of these salary commission members.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it. Are any questions from council? Councilmember Evans.
So how will this be advertised to the public if they're interested in participating on this, to submit a letter of interest?
In 2009, the city clerk solicited for candidates for the mayor's consideration, and that's one way that we could put the message out to the public.
What are the other ways?
The mayor might have 3 people that he's considering and brings forward.
Yeah, I would just add that really it's whatever process the council feels appropriate in terms of appointing 3 members is available to you. We can certainly solicit in the manner in which we appoint or solicit and appoint other members of our boards and commissions, or council members can identify members individually for the mayor's consideration, all of which are subject to the council's confirmation, or another approach that you find might be useful.
I know that one of the people, Brian Pearson, who was on the last one, still lives in the area. I don't think Robert Terry, I believe he passed away a year or so ago sometime, so he's obviously not available. So I don't know about the others, but will you contact those that were on and see if they're interested, or I guess that's up to the mayor to do that?
I think that's up to the council as to how we want to do that. They can serve 2 years, so 2 terms, I mean. So, yes.
Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Sandberg, and then Councilmember Lamb.
Can we update on our website that we are actively seeking council salary commission applicants? There's links on the boards and commissions page, but it doesn't say we're actively seeking applications. So it seems like that could be an easy change.
Okay. Finished? Perfect. Councilmember Lamb.
So I think that as a person who appointed the last salary commission, I think almost to a person, with the exception of the gentleman who's been deceased, they said that they did not want to serve on. They said, we'll do this if you only do it for 1 term. But I think there's no harm in reaching out and asking again if people are interested in doing that. And I think that, I think adding it to the website is a good idea. And I think having the clerk solicit's a good idea. And I think, as the city manager suggested, having individual council members, if they know somebody in the community who they think would be a good choice for the mayor, to forward that name to him and to encourage him to consider it. And then I trust that the mayor will make a good decision and will review the applicants who are in front of him and make a good recommendation for council. So I think that's, cast a wide net, and the mayor will narrow it down, and then we'll have an opportunity to confirm those.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor?
I support Councilmember Lamb's and Councilmember Sandberg's recommendations.
Good. And so if the public's hearing, or any way that we can let the public know that I will be accepting applications and then send them to my city email, I look forward to reviewing those and then coming back to council with a list of names. And certainly if Mr. Terry is no longer with us, Mr. Langkow and Mr. Pearson, if they have the experience and they'd like to serve again, could certainly be strong considerations. So just a point of clarification for me as well. Did you say people on the commission cannot be on current committees, like a planning committee or planning commission? Or
they cannot be employees, officials, officers of the city, or immediate family members.
Okay.
Of
so that
employees.
My 3 youngest kids are out.
That
okay,
would
good
do
to know.
it.
Perfect. Well, I would like to set a deadline, since we need to have this back by, I think, the 18th of March, as I recall. Our next council meeting, currently we had the 18th, but we canceled that. So our next council meeting would be the 4th of March. We need to have a decision made by the 18th. I'd like to set a deadline for applications of March 3rd, so I could have those before the meeting on the 4th. I'll review those the morning of the 4th. Unless I get 100 applications, then I would probably ask the council to give me a week. But based upon last time's interest level, I think I'll be able to review those in short order. So if we could put on the agenda for the 4th of March for me to make a recommendation. So again, the deadline for applications and interest would be March 3rd. Great.
Thank you.
That would end that agenda item. We do have an executive session tonight. This is in regards to potential litigation. I would imagine this would only last for about 15 minutes, and I do not expect that council will be reconvening after that. So, thank you all.